What's up everybody, it's Sword Fitness here. And the topic for today's video comes from one of my coworkers who also watches and is subscribed to the YouTube channel, so I want to shout you out. You know who you are. Thanks for the support. The topic he was asking me about yesterday was he had heard a lot of stuff about one of the fads in dieting that you might all be familiar with, intermittent fasting. He asked me my thoughts on it and what I think, is it good, bad, how to do it correctly, etc. And so that's pretty much what I'm going to cover in today's topic. I'm going to bring you up to speed with everything that I know about intermittent fasting, and I'll give you some anecdotal information. I have tried it myself. I will let you know what I think of it, if I still do it, did it work for me, etc., all that kind of stuff. So let's get into the topic. So intermittent fasting. What is intermittent fasting, right? Because it has a fancy title to it. Intermittent fasting, to put it simply, is just not eating for scheduled periods of time throughout a day and then eating within a scheduled eating window every single day. So basically you create a schedule. So for some people, let's say it could be 16 hours of not eating. Typically you'll start early in the evening and it'll go to about early or later on in the morning, right? That's about a 16-hour fast, and then you have 8 hours where that's your window to eat, right? And it doesn't really matter what you eat, you just eat within that window. And then once you reach the end of that eating window, you go back to fasting, and then you kind of repeat that. So I went ahead and dropped one of the most common fasting strategies, which is the 16-8 ratio for fasting. So 16 hours of fasting, 8 hours of eating. But this isn't the only way to do intermittent fasting. The intermittent fasting, by definition, is essentially just not eating for a scheduled period of time and eating for a scheduled period of time. So you can really mess with that ratio and find something that works for you, and it'll still be considered intermittent fasting. So that's the first thing that I kind of want to clarify. There's no specific correct way to do intermittent fasting. As long as you are sticking within those consistent windows for whatever works for you, you are practicing intermittent fasting. So what is the goal of intermittent fasting? The reason why a lot of people follow this, and I want to make a disclaimer here. I know that some people intermittent fast because of religious reasons. It's within their religion to fast for certain amounts of time and then eat in others. So they are practicing intermittent fasting, but I will not really touch on that in this video. I will only give you guys the scope of knowledge that I know where it pertains to my career, right? So for the purposes of this video, I will only talk about the fitness and nutritional consequences of intermittent fasting. I won't delve into any of the religious aspects, right? So let's say that you are someone that isn't doing it for religious reasons, so you have a choice whether you want to do intermittent fasting or not. So what is the target of intermittent fasting? It is basically a dieting strategy where, because you're eating in a certain window and you're restricting yourself from eating outside of that window, the idea behind it is because you have less time to eat, you will naturally consume less food and therefore less calories, putting your body in that ever-essential caloric deficit to lose weight over time, right? And that's pretty much all it boils down to. So it's pretty much like any other diet, so keto, paleo, Atkins, if it fits your macros, whatever, right? The idea of any type of diet for losing weight, right, losing fat, it all boils down to the same principle, even though some people don't like to hear the word calories. If you don't like the word calories, let's replace that with energy, right? The energy that we get from the macronutrients in our food. The way that you lose weight is by maintaining a prolonged deficit of what your body needs to basically stay the same, maintain homeostasis. If your body is consistently within a deficit of what it needs to maintain homeostasis, it will pull the energy that it needs from other sources on your body besides the food that you're bringing in. So it could bring this energy from the stored fat on your body, and if you're not careful, it will catabolize the muscle mass on your body as well. So this is kind of influenced by how extreme of a caloric deficit we maintain, which is why it's important to try to resist the temptations of eating as few calories as possible because you think you'll achieve your results faster. This is called crash dieting. I'll make a whole other video on that at another point, and I have experience with that as well. So that is the goal of intermittent fasting. It is another dieting strategy to lose weight, right? Get to your ideal physique if your goal is to lose fat, right? So now that we've defined what intermittent fasting is, And what the goal of it is, I want to tell you about my experience with it, and then I'll segue that into whether I believe you should try it or not. So when I was early on into my fitness journey, I actually did practice intermittent fasting, but I did it in a way where it wasn't like on purpose. It was more of a subconscious intermittent fast, because this is something that I practiced throughout my life actually. Even while I was obese, I technically practiced intermittent fasting. Remember, I defined intermittent fasting as a window where you are allowed to consume food, allowed to consume calories, and a window where you do not. So me, naturally, just growing up, I did not like to eat in the morning. I was not a breakfast person. So me, naturally, I would save all of my calories for lunch, maybe some snacks, dinner, maybe some snacks, and then I would fast for the night, the entire morning, because I did not eat breakfast, and I would repeat, right? So that in and of itself is intermittent fasting, and it is the form of intermittent fasting that I practiced subconsciously without even knowing anything about it. Did it work for me? Well, yes. It worked for me because I wasn't even thinking about it. This was something natural for me, so it was easy to stick to because it was already part of my lifestyle. So the takeaway here is, do intermittent fasting in the most comfortable way possible. You might look it up and you might see the 16-8 rule, or 24, something like that, like some crazy stuff. Maybe OMAD, which stands for 1 meal a day, for those of you that are really extreme about eating all your calories in a window and then just not eating elsewhere, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it. My advice to you is find the window that is most comfortable for you if you want to try it, right? So that's been my experience with intermittent fasting, or at least my initial one, right? Because I did actually consciously try to intermittent fast later on in my fitness journey. I tried the OMAD diet, 1 meal a day, and let me tell you my experience with that. So my belief, right, and this is what I went through trying that out. I made lunch, so a midday lunch meal. I made that a big calorie dense meal where I could eat whatever I wanted. So pizza, Chinese food. What else did I like? I went to a Thai place. I would get pad Thai, things like, well, basically whatever I wanted, because I had my entire calorie budget planned out for that one meal, which let me eat whatever I wanted, pretty much, right? So in that sense, it was kind of liberating. But here's the major drawback: the extreme hunger that I would feel, not in the morning because I was used to not eating in the morning, but at night, right? The extreme hunger at night made it difficult to sleep. Sometimes I would give into cravings and I would binge eat and then overeat calories because of it, and things like that. But the most important drawback for me that I want to point out with OMAD specifically is, if you want to do that, you should time it within a couple hours of your workout, before your workout, so you have energy to do your workout. Because I remember, and I'm gonna get personal here. So I remember when I was on OMAD, right? What I would end up doing is, because lunch was my meal and I always work out in the mornings, I would be extremely fasted and maybe even starving, and it would cause me to feel lightheaded and even nauseous during my workouts. I wouldn't be able to push as hard, so I found myself plateauing for a long time. And it got so bad that I can count about like 3 times where I actually came home, I looked at my mother when I got into the house and I said, "Mom, I don't feel so good." And I immediately vomited. That happened to me like 3 times, and it was after that 3rd time that I realized I'm not eating enough, and I'm definitely not optimizing my timing for my training. So OMAD, you got to be very, very careful with that. In fact, I do not recommend it for those reasons that I listed. And so ever since then, I pulled back on that fast a little bit. I went to the traditional 16-8. What I didn't like about the 16-8 was I could stick to it. It wasn't hard to stick to, but I didn't like feeling restricted in any way, because it didn't allow me to indulge any cravings that I had outside of that fast. I would have to have the mental discipline and fortitude to make it to that next eating window. So for me personally, the 16-8 is probably the best way to do intermittent fasting, but I don't find it necessary. what I like to do is I like to plan out my day. I like to be proactive with my diet and not reactive. I like to, when I'm eating my breakfast, I weigh out my foods and I'm thinking, okay, will be my breakfast, and I'm already thinking about lunch. I pre-log stuff, right? This will be roughly my lunch. This will be roughly my dinner. I've got some calories left. Let's fill out some snacks for the day. So anytime I hit a craving, I can just move things around slightly and it still works for me. This is what I do. You don't have to do this. I'm just giving you what I personally do. But that's the main thing about the 16-8. It works, and I could stick to it, but every once in a while I would fall off of it, and I would feel like I wasn't doing it the proper justice for like following it correctly, because every now and then I would give into a craving and eat maybe at night or early in the morning, something, right? And again, the same principle applies. I chose the 16-8 window that worked best for my lifestyle, which for me was skipping breakfast. So because of that, and I still trained in the morning, because of that I would constantly be doing fasted cardio or fasted weightlifting, and I found that while I wasn't feeling sick anymore, it did still plateau my progress. I wasn't getting stronger. I was feeling a little fatigued in my workouts, not nauseous, but definitely fatigued. So I found that I needed to do one of two things. I either needed to move my workout later in the day, if that was manageable for me, which I really like the morning workout. I like to start my day off with hitting PRs, and it just gives me more energy for the day. It makes me, it puts me in a good mood for the day. So I wasn't really willing to move my workout time. The other option would be to move that fasting time, but I love to eat lunch and dinner, so I wasn't gonna, you can see where I'm going with this, right? The 16-8 just didn't really work for me. So do I do intermittent fasting anymore? The answer is no. For that reason, and actually one more reason that I'm gonna touch on it in this video, but I'll actually dedicate a whole other video to it because it's kind of an advanced concept. So for those of you that are like me, where you're not just eating to maintain your body's nutritional needs, but you're actually eating to try to fuel your body for performance and growing muscle, building strength, whatever it might be. You have performance goals. Protein is really, really important for the athletics lifestyle. Everyone needs a certain amount of protein to just survive, to be healthy, right? To not have complications with health, right? But athletes require even more protein to support something called muscle protein synthesis. So muscle protein synthesis is basically an activation of the protein that you've consumed within a certain time frame to begin the anabolic process of your muscle cells utilizing that protein to build more muscle, right? Which will make you stronger, it'll increase your muscular size, definition, etc., right? So the best way to take advantage of muscle protein synthesis, this is kind of an advanced concept, so I'm just going to touch on it. I'll make a video about it in the future. The best way to optimize muscle protein synthesis is to eat about 5 meals a day, each containing about at least roughly 15 to 20 grams of protein. That is a sufficient amount of protein to activate that muscle protein synthesis window. Now, that is like the cherry on top of optimization. This is something that I just started getting into not too long ago. And it's also, honestly, it's just for like the extra competitive edge. And maybe it'll save you a little bit of time in terms of seeing results, right? The most important thing is just get enough protein in the day. Video all about protein coming very soon, and we'll talk about all of that. So main priority, just get enough protein for the day. Try to get it from as many complete sources of protein as possible. We'll talk about that versus incomplete, so getting all your essential amino acids and all of that stuff, right? So I chose to let go of intermittent fasting because I found it was much better for me to spread out my meals throughout the day to fully take advantage of the muscle protein synthesis windows, right? So 5 meals a day, 15 to 20 grams of protein at least for those meals. And so that works really well for me. So that's been my experience with intermittent fasting. And I believe that's it really for the video. Let me know down in the comments if there's any other questions about intermittent fasting that I may have missed, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head. So I told you what it is, what the goal of it is. I told you my experience with it. Do I recommend it? Let me retouch on that. Do I recommend it, right? So it really depends on you. I will tell you it is not necessary. You do not have to intermittent fast, just like all of these fad diets, right? You do not have to do keto, paleo, Atkins, whatever, if you do not want to. Do whatever works for you. So if intermittent fasting works for you, take full advantage of it. But if you feel too restricted that you can't stick to it, then you don't have to. Another thing I want to point out, one more drawback of intermittent fasting, is it's not a bulletproof option for losing weight. Now, this is something that I have heard anecdotal stories from some of my coworkers about, where they have tried intermittent fasting. And this is something my mother actually fell into too. She tried intermittent fasting for a while. And something that happens to them is because they feel restricted, they feel like they have to really take advantage of eating in that window. It is still possible to overconsume your calories for the day, even with a shorter eating window. That doesn't, like, just because you are eating for less time in the day does not change the actual nutritional value of the foods you are eating. So if you're still eating pizza, chips, burgers, ice cream all the time for in that window, you are still going to eat in a calorie surplus and therefore gain weight, most of it being body fat, depending on how aggressive the surplus is. So that is also something worth noting. But it can be a great tool. If you're like me who just didn't like to eat breakfast and that's comfortable for you, you want to save your calories for later in the day to enjoy better, tastier, bigger meals, right? Then, if that works for you, then that works for you. Nobody's gonna know your body better than yourself at the end of the day, right? Do what makes your body happy, and try to stay as healthy as possible. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. Like I said, leave any comments down below if there's anything else you want to know about intermittent fasting that I may not have covered in this video. Leave a like if you found this helpful, if you learned something, or even if you just found it entertaining to watch me ramble about dieting stuff. With that being said, take it easy, you guys, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I'll see y'all next time.